I never thought I'd be writing this post, but here we are. I'm still processing everything that happened and honestly don't know if I handled this the right way. Maybe you all can help me figure out if I'm the a-hole here or if I was just justified in what I did. So a bit of background first. I'm 34 and I work in IT, making decent money. My brother Mark is 38 and married to Sarah, whom I'll call my sister-in-law. They have a 16-year-old son named Sean, who has always been, let's just say, challenging. Mark and Sarah have always been pretty lenient parents, the type who think their kid can do no wrong and blame everyone else when problems arise. I live about 20 minutes away from them, and for the past few years, I've been pretty involved in Sean's life. I'd pick him up from school sometimes when his parents were busy, take him to movies, buy him video games, that sort of uncle stuff. I genuinely cared about the kid and wanted to be a positive influence in his life. Looking back now, I think he saw me as an easy target rather than someone who cared about him. The stealing started about 8 months ago, but I didn't realize it at first. I keep cash in my wallet for various things, parking meters, tips, small purchases at places that don't take cards, that kind of stuff. I usually keep around $60 to $80 in there, nothing crazy. I started noticing that I seemed to be running out of cash faster than usual, but I just figured I was spending more without really paying attention. It was probably 2 months before I started getting suspicious. I'd put 2 20s and a 10 in my wallet on Sunday night, and by Wednesday, I'd only have like $15 left. I started keeping better track, and that's when I realized money was definitely disappearing. At first, I thought maybe I was losing my mind or just forgetting purchases, but I started writing down exactly how much I had and when. The pattern became clear pretty quickly. Money would go missing on days when Sean was at my place or when I'd drive him somewhere. I'd leave my wallet on the kitchen counter or on my dresser while I used the bathroom or took a shower, and Sean would often be wandering around the house during those times. I tested it a few times by leaving specific amounts and checking after he left, and sure enough, money would be gone. I was honestly devastated. This kid that I'd been trying to mentor and support was stealing from me, and he was doing it regularly. We're not talking about a one-time mistake or taking a few dollars for candy. He was taking $20 or $30 at a time, sometimes multiple times a week when he was over. I knew I had to confront him about it, but I also knew it needed to be handled carefully. John has always been the type to lie when caught doing something wrong, and his parents have always backed him up. I needed to be absolutely sure before I said anything, and I needed to handle it in a way that would actually teach him something rather than just getting him in trouble. So I decided to talk to him directly first and give him a chance to come clean and make things right. About 3 weeks ago, I asked Sean to stay after I dropped him off at home. I pulled him aside and told him I knew money had been going missing from my wallet and that I was pretty sure he was the one taking it. I wasn't accusatory or angry. I just told him I was hurt and disappointed, and that if he needed money for something, he should have just asked me. Sean immediately went into full denial mode. He got all offended and started going on about how he would never steal from me. How could I even think that? How hurt he was that I didn't trust him. He was really laying it on thick. And for a moment I almost felt bad for even bringing it up. But I knew what I knew, and his reaction honestly just confirmed it for me. An innocent person would be confused and want to help figure out what was happening. A guilty person gets defensive and tries to make you feel bad for even asking. I told him I hoped I was wrong, but that I was going to be more careful with my wallet going forward. I thought maybe that would be enough to get him to stop, but knowing I was onto him would scare him straight. I was wrong. Not only did the stealing continue, but Sean apparently went straight to his mom and told her I was accusing him of stealing. Sarah called me that same evening, absolutely furious. She laid into me about how dare I accuse her son of stealing, how I was trying to cause drama in the family, how I was obviously just trying to make Sean look bad because I was jealous of their family, or some nonsense like that. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to cause problems, that I had clear evidence money was going missing, and that I'd approached Sean privately to give him a chance to make it right. But Sarah wasn't having any of it. She told me that Sean was hurting and crying, that I had damaged his trust in me, and that maybe I shouldn't be alone with him anymore if I was going to make up stories about him stealing. That conversation really got to me. Here I was trying to handle a difficult situation in the most respectful way possible, and I was being made out to be the bad guy. Meanwhile, Sean was getting away with stealing from me and playing the victim on top of it. I realized that the gentle approach wasn't going to work here, and that Sean's parents were never going to believe he was capable of doing anything wrong. That's when I started planning what I guess you could call my trap. I'd heard about people using fake money to catch thieves before, and I figured if Sean was going to keep stealing from me, I might as well make it count. I went online and ordered some prop money that looks pretty realistic at first glance, but has replica printed on it in small letters and says, "For motion picture use only," on the back. The fake bills I got were pretty convincing. They had the right feel and look, and unless you really examined them closely or tried to use them, you probably wouldn't notice they were fake right away. I replaced about $60 in my wallet with fake 20s and 10s, and then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I picked Sean up from school and brought him back to my place for a few hours while his parents were at work. I left my wallet on the kitchen counter while I went to grab us some snacks from the basement, and when I came back up, I casually checked my wallet. Sure enough, one of the fake 20s was gone. I didn't say anything to Sean about it. I just acted normal for the rest of the afternoon and dropped him off at home as usual. I figured he'd probably try to spend the money that weekend, and I was curious to see what would happen. What happened was better than I could have hoped for. That Saturday, Sean and a few of his friends went to the mall. Apparently, he tried to use the fake 20 to buy something at GameStop, and the cashier immediately recognized it as fake money. Mall security was called, and since using counterfeit currency is a federal offense, they called the police. Sean was arrested right there in the mall. Since he was 16, his parents were called to come and get him, but he still spent several hours in custody while they sorted everything out. He was charged with attempting to use counterfeit currency, which is a serious offense even for a minor. The first I heard about any of this was when Mark called me that Saturday evening, absolutely livid. He was screaming at me over the phone about how I had set up his son, how I was trying to ruin Sean's life, how I was a terrible person for getting a kid arrested. Sarah was in the background yelling too, calling me all sorts of names. I stayed calm and told them I had no idea what they were talking about, that I'd heard Sean got in trouble at the mall but didn't know any details. Mark told me about the fake money and I acted surprised. I said that was really weird and that I couldn't imagine where Sean would have gotten fake money from. Of course, Mark and Sarah immediately accused me of planting the fake money on Sean somehow. I pointed out that would be impossible since I wasn't even at the mall with him, and asked how exactly they thought I could have done that. They didn't have a good answer, but they were still convinced I was somehow responsible. That's when I decided to come clean, at least partially. I told them I had suspected Sean was stealing from my wallet for months, and that I had tried to handle it quietly by talking to him directly. I reminded Sarah about our conversation weeks earlier when she accused me of causing drama. I told them that after that conversation, I realized Sean's parents weren't going to believe he was capable of doing anything wrong, so I had decided to take measures to protect myself. I explained that I had put fake money in my wallet to see if my suspicions were correct, and that apparently they were, since Sean somehow ended up with fake bills. I didn't directly accuse him of stealing, I just laid out the facts and let them draw their own conclusions. Mark and Sarah were furious, but I could tell they were starting to realize what had actually happened. Mark kept insisting that there had to be some other explanation, but Mark was getting quieter and quieter as I explained everything. I think he was starting to put the pieces together and realize that his son had been lying to them. I told them I was sorry things had turned out this way, but that I had tried to handle it quietly and privately, and they had shut me down. I said I hoped Sean would learn something from this experience, and that maybe they could use it as an opportunity to have some honest conversations about respect and honesty. The call ended with Sarah hanging up on me, and I haven't talked to either of them since. Sean is facing charges, though I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen with that since he's a minor. I know they've had to hire a lawyer, and I imagine this is going to be expensive and stressful for the whole family. I keep going back and forth on whether I did the right thing. On one hand, Sean was stealing from me repeatedly, and his parents refused to believe it or do anything about it. I tried to handle it the right way first, and that didn't work. Maybe facing real consequences is what he needs to learn, that actions have consequences. On the other hand, getting a 16-year-old kid arrested feels pretty extreme, even if he was stealing from me. I could have just stopped having him over to my house or found other ways to protect my money without setting up a trap that would get him in legal trouble. His whole future could be affected by having a criminal record, even as a minor. I also feel bad about the impact this is having on Mark and Sarah. Yeah, they were jerks about not believing Sean was stealing, but they're still dealing with their kid getting arrested and potentially having a criminal record. That's got to be incredibly stressful and scary for them as parents, even if it's partly their own fault for not addressing the problem when I first brought it up. The thing that bothers me most is that I'm not sure Sean is actually going to learn anything from this. He's probably just going to see himself as the victim here, and his parents are probably going to support that view. Instead of taking responsibility for stealing, he's most likely going to blame me for setting him up and feel justified in being angry at me. So I guess what I'm asking is, did I go too far? Should I have found another way to handle this situation? Was I justified in setting up a trap to catch him stealing? Or should I just have accepted that his parents weren't going to believe me and found other ways to protect myself? I genuinely don't know if I'm the a-hole here or if I did what I had to do to make Sean face consequences for his actions. Update 1. I wasn't planning to update this so soon, but a lot has happened. First, thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. The responses were mixed, which honestly reassured me. This situation was complicated and there wasn't an obvious right answer. Many people raised legal questions about what I did. I've since learned that it's a bit of a grey area. Setting up a trap for a thief isn't necessarily illegal, but using fake money, especially if it looks real, can be problematic, even if it's clearly marked as a prop. Some mentioned I could technically be charged with possessing counterfeit currency, though that's unlikely. I spoke to a lawyer friend who said what I did probably isn't illegal, but it might complicate things if Sean's lawyer tries to claim I entrapped him. He advised me to keep quiet about the details and consider getting my own lawyer if things escalate. The bigger update is that I heard from my brother, Mark, I expected him to be angry again, but he actually sounded defeated. Sean finally admitted to stealing from me, not just once or twice, but regularly over the past several months. When Mark and Sarah confronted him seriously, he broke down and confessed. He'd been taking money from my wallet, usually $20 or $30 at a time, and spending it on games, food, or to show off with his friends. Worse, Sean also admitted to stealing from Mark and Sarah. He'd been taking cash from Sarah's purse and from the emergency stash in their kitchen drawer. They'd noticed money missing but chalked it up to forgetfulness. In hindsight, they realized he'd likely taken several $100s over the past year. Mark apologized for not believing me sooner. He said they knew Sean had behavior issues but assumed it was just typical teenage stuff. Finding out their son had been lying and stealing for months was a harsh wake-up call. Sarah, however, is still struggling with it. Even though she now knows Sean was stealing, she partly blames me. She's been saying things like, "Yes, Sean was wrong, but that doesn't make what you did right," and that I could have handled it without getting him arrested. I get where she's coming from. It must be hard for a parent to accept that their kid was capable of this, and maybe it's easier to blame the person who exposed it than face the truth. But I did try to handle it differently at first, and they shut me down. Mark asked if I'd be willing to meet with them and Sean to talk things through. He said Sean wants to apologize, and they hope we can work through this as a family. I told him I'd think about it. Honestly, I'm not sure that's a good idea yet. I'm still hurt by how they treated me, and I don't know if Sean is truly sorry or just regrets getting caught. The legal situation is still unfolding. Sean has a court date next month. Their lawyer expects he'll be offered a diversion program, probably community service and fines. If he completes it successfully, he shouldn't end up with permanent record. I'm still torn about whether I handled things the right way, but I feel more certain that at least the truth came out. Sean wasn't just stealing from me. He was doing it to his own parents too, and without this incident, I doubt anything would have changed. Maybe getting arrested was extreme, but it seems like it finally made everyone realize how serious this was. I'll update again after the court date or if anything else major happens. For now, I'm just trying to figure out what kind of relationship I can rebuild with my brother's family. Update 2. Things have taken another unexpected turn. A couple of days ago, Mark called me with news that completely shifted my perspective. After Sean confessed to stealing from me and his parents, Mark and Sarah decided to clamp down. They took away his devices and started monitoring him closely. That's when everything began to unravel. While going through Sean's room, Sarah found a stash of expensive items hidden in his closet: an iPad, video games, a high-end watch, sneakers, and other electronics. When confronted, Sean initially claimed they were gifts or that he'd bought them with allowance money. But Mark and Sarah knew better. These items were worth far more than what he could afford, even with money he stole from us. Pressed harder, Sean admitted he'd been shoplifting from stores around town for months, maybe longer. He'd stolen regularly from the mall and other shops, kept some things for himself, sold the rest to other kids at school. He broke down crying, saying he didn't know why he kept doing it, that it started small but escalated over time. It's clear this wasn't just petty theft. He'd built a pattern of calculated behavior. This changes how I feel about everything. When I thought he was just stealing cash from family, I felt guilty about involving the police. But now, knowing the full extent of what he was doing, I feel more justified. It seems my actions inadvertently brought a much larger issue to light. Mark and Sarah are overwhelmed. They've realized how deeply Sean deceived them and are now working with a therapist who specializes in adolescent behavioral issues. They're also facing financial fallout. Mark said their lawyer advised them to get ahead of any future charges by reaching out to the stores and making restitution. They're potentially looking at thousands in damages. Surprisingly, Sarah called me yesterday for the first time since all this started. She apologized for not believing me and for lashing out when I tried to help. She admitted that if I hadn't used the fake money trap, they might never have discovered the depth of Sean's behavior. She even asked if I'd consider writing a letter to the court in support of Sean to show that family is still backing him through this. I told her I'd think about it. I want to help him recover, but I also don't want to downplay how serious this has all been. What haunts me is how long this went unnoticed. Sean was stealing from stores, selling stolen goods, and lying to everyone's face, including mine, for months, maybe years. That kind of premeditated deception from a 16-year-old is deeply troubling. I keep thinking about all the times he was at my house, laughing, talking about school and his future, while secretly plotting to steal from me. It makes me question our entire relationship. At the same time, I do feel for him. 16 is still young. Clearly there's something deeper going on. His inability to stop, even when he knew it was wrong, suggests that he needs more than just discipline. He needs help. Mark asked again if I'd be willing to meet with Sean so he can apologize in person. Part of me wants to hear him out and maybe take a step towards healing, but another part of me is wary. I don't want to reopen wounds or risk being hurt again. For now, I'm waiting until after this court date. If Sean shows genuine remorse and commits to getting help, maybe we can begin to rebuild trust, but I'm not going to rush into forgiveness or act like none of this happened. The damage is real, and any recovery will take time. Update 3. I wasn't planning to update again so soon, but something happened yesterday that I think changes everything, and I wanted to share it with you all. I'm honestly still processing what went down, and I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. So Sean's court date was supposed to be next week, but apparently his lawyer moved it up because they wanted to present all the information about his other thefts as part of a comprehensive picture for the judge. Mark had been keeping me updated on the preparations, and it sounded like they were hoping to get Sean into some kind of treatment program rather than just punishment. Yesterday afternoon, I got a call from Mark asking if I could come over to their house. He said Sean wanted to talk to me before the court date, and that there was something important he needed to tell me. I was hesitant because I still wasn't sure I was ready to have that conversation. But Mark sounded really serious, so I agreed to come over. When I got to their house, Sean was sitting at the kitchen table with Mark and Sarah. The kid looked terrible, like he hadn't been sleeping well and had been crying. Sarah looked pretty rough too, like she'd been stressed out and emotional. Mark seemed more composed, but I could tell this whole situation was taking a toll on all of them. Sean immediately started apologizing to me, and I could tell he was genuinely upset. He wasn't making excuses or trying to minimize what he'd done. He was taking full responsibility for stealing from me and for lying about it when I confronted him. He said he knew he'd betrayed my trust and that he was sorry for putting me in a position where I felt like I had to set a trap to catch him. But then he told me something that completely blindsided me. He said that the reason he'd been stealing wasn't just because he wanted money for stuff. He said he'd been getting bullied at school pretty severely, and some of the older kids had been demanding money from him on a regular basis. If he didn't pay them, they'd threaten him or sometimes actually hurt him. According to Sean, this had been going on for most of the school year. A group of older kids had targeted him and a few other younger students, and they'd essentially been running an extortion racket. They'd demand $20 or $30 from Sean every week or two, and if he didn't pay, they'd make his life miserable, shoving him in the hallways, messing with his locker, threatening him after school. Sean said he was too embarrassed to tell his parents what was happening because he felt like it made him look weak. He also said he was afraid that if his parents complained to the school, it would just make the bullying worse. So he started stealing money to pay off the bullies, thinking he could handle the situation on his own. The shoplifting started as another way to get money and items to give to the bullies. Sometimes they demand specific things instead of cash, like expensive sneakers or electronics. Sean said he got pretty good at stealing because he felt like he had to, like it was the only way to protect himself at school. I was honestly floored by this revelation. Here I'd been thinking that Sean was just a selfish kid who was stealing for fun or to buy himself nice things, when in reality he was being victimized and was stealing out of desperation. It completely reframed everything that had happened. Sarah was crying while Sean was telling me all this, and Mark looked absolutely furious. Not at Sean, but at the situation and at the kids who had been bullying him. Apparently Sean had only told them about the bullying the day before, after they'd been working with the therapist to try to understand why he'd been stealing. Sean said he wanted to tell me the truth because he felt like I deserved to know why he'd been taking money from me, and because he wanted me to understand that he never meant to hurt me personally. He said he'd always looked up to me, and that stealing from me was one of the hardest things about the whole situation. But he felt like he didn't have any other choice. I didn't know what to say. On one hand, I felt terrible for Sean and angry at the kids who had been bullying him. No 16-year-old should have to deal with that kind of intimidation and extortion. On the other hand, I was still hurt that he hadn't trusted me enough to ask for help. And I was frustrated that all of this could have been avoided if he'd just been honest about what was happening. Mark said they'd already contacted the school about the bullying situation and that there was going to be an investigation. Apparently, once they knew what to look for, they realized there had been some signs Sean's grades had been dropping. He'd been more withdrawn at home, and he'd been reluctant to go to school or participate in activities. They just hadn't connected those changes to bullying. The school administration is taking the situation seriously, especially since it sounds like this group of kids was targeting multiple younger students. There are going to be disciplinary actions for the bullies, and the school is implementing some new anti-bullying measures. Sean's therapist is also working with him on better ways to handle conflict and ask for help when he's in trouble. As for the legal situation, Sean's lawyer thinks this new information might actually help his case. The fact that he was stealing because he was being victimized rather than just for personal gain might make the judge more sympathetic. They're hoping he can still get into a diversion program that focuses on getting him help rather than just punishment. I told Sean that I appreciated him telling me the truth and that I was sorry he'd been going through such a difficult situation at school. I also told him I wished he'd felt comfortable enough to ask me for help instead of stealing from me. I said I would have gladly helped him deal with the bullying situation if I'd known what was happening. At the same time, I made it clear that while I understood his reasoning, stealing still wasn't the right solution. I told him that there are always other options, even when a situation feels hopeless, and that part of growing up is learning to ask for help when you need it instead of trying to handle everything on your own. Sean said he understood and that he was committed to working with his therapist to develop better coping strategies. He also said he wanted to pay me back for all the money he'd stolen, even if it takes him a long time to earn enough to cover it all. Mark and Sarah said they were going to help him get a part-time job so he can start making restitution to everyone he stole from. I left their house feeling emotionally exhausted but also somewhat relieved. I still think what I did with the fake money was justified, given the information I had at the time, but knowing the full story makes me feel less angry about the whole situation. Sean wasn't just a selfish thief. He was a scared kid who made bad choices because he felt trapped and didn't know how to ask for help. I'm planning to write a letter to the court explaining the situation and asking them to consider Sean's circumstances when determining his sentence. I still think he needs to face consequences for his actions, but I also think he deserves a chance to get help and turn his life around. The bullying doesn't excuse the stealing, but it does provide important context that I think the judge should know about. Moving forward, I'm cautiously optimistic that Sean and I can rebuild our relationship. It's going to take time and a lot of work to rebuild trust. But knowing that he wasn't just taking advantage of me makes it easier to imagine forgiving him and moving past this. I've told Mark and Sarah that I'm willing to be part of Sean's support system as he works through his issues, but that I need to see consistent change over time before I'll be comfortable being alone with him again. The whole experience has been a reminder that situations are often more complicated than they appear on the surface, and that sometimes people do bad things for reasons that aren't immediately obvious. I'm glad that the truth finally came out, even though it took getting Sean arrested to make it happen. Hopefully, that will end up being a turning point for him and he'll learn healthier ways to handle difficult situations in the future. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.